Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Condor Airlines, offering non-stop service from Ted Stevens International Airport to Germany and beyond. Featuring refurbished cabins and new seats with individual entertainment systems available on all Condor long-haul flights. More information at condor.com. Condor, born to fly.
The National Weather Service.
Welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney, and this is your Alaska Weather, April 19th, 2016. You can follow us on www.arh.noaa.gov as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Starting off with the satellite tonight, we have put into motion. We have a occluded low pressure system sitting over here with the eastern Aleutians, and with a trailing occluded front extending over into the Gulf. You can see a swath of moisture that's spilling over with the southeasterly flow into the southwest interior. Farther north, you continue to have this easterly flow with a high pressure sitting over the Beaufort Sea, and that's bringing in low clouds in this region and some snow activity. And that's shooting down also the northerly flow, bringing lower stratus into the northern Bering Strait and the northern Bering. Over in the southeast, pretty much mostly sunny sky conditions there with high pressure dominating, and that's pretty much going to last the next several days here. We had breaking clouds also just north of Fairbanks along the eastern Brooks Range. Put in the loop, satellite in the loop again. We have another occluded low pressure system sitting here just south of AKwx, and that's trailing a occluded front just south of the chain here. And you still have some cloud cover that's bringing in here. But we also have another system that's sitting over near Shemya, and that's bringing low clouds and stratus in this region with continued wintry mix in this region here. Plenty of cloud cover. And putting in the loop here, you can see this low pressure system that's sitting right here just north of Shemya. Today's weather, here's that occluded low pressure system right here over the eastern Bering, trailing the occluded front. Southeasterly flow through the Gulf is bringing some light rain along the eastern Kenai, extending down to Kodiak, as well spilling over into the Alaska Range and Aleutian Range, and so you're going to some light rain there, and that's spilling over just also into the Kuskokwim Bay region. Farther out northwest, you're going to have along the near Chevy that occluded low pressure system. With the cooler air, you'll have a wintry mix there along the western and northern Bering Sea. On the southeast, again, high pressure dominating over the Yakutat area with the ridge extending down further south of the Hattagawai region. So again, you'll have mostly clear skies, mostly sunny skies today, and then it'll clear out later on tonight, continue. Farther north, you have that trailing trough that's pushing through the eastern Brooks Range, and that's bringing some snow and blowing snow issues up there, not enough to produce any advisories though. Then for tonight's forecast, this occluded low pressure system just sitting north of Shemya will continue to fill and dissipate. Weak troughs will spin around it, and they'll bring a wintry mix through the western and northern Bering Sea. Along the eastern Bering, you have this trailing occluded front extending down into just south of Kodiak, and they'll bring a more warm air southeasterly push into the eastern and southwest territory. And then you'll have light rain in these regions. Somewhat of a dry, well, you do have a dry slot over the lower Kuskokwim and upper Kuskokwim Valley, and that'll extend all the way up to past Fairbanks, just south of the eastern Brooks Range. And as you can see, we have high pressure sitting over the Anchorage Bowl. So you can downsloping effect here, drier conditions over the Anchorage area, and as well as extending up through the Copper River Basin. Onshore flow, so you'll have some continued light rain for tonight along the northern coastal communities and just starting to approach there near Sitka. Wednesday forecast, you have these triple weak low pressure systems sitting over the lower Bering Sea and a trailing occluded front that's falling apart. Again, southeasterly push, warmer air pushing farther westward into the Bering. So you'll have a wintry mix as the temperatures mix and collide. Farther along the Antarctic Gulf, you're going to have snow farther inland. Farther north along the Arctic Range, again, a weak trough pushing through, continued light snow showers and blowing snow. High pressure dominating over the northern Gulf, southeast panhandle. You'll have mostly sunny skies for Wednesday, and then the downsloping over the Anchorage Bowl as well as the central interior. Thursday forecast, these low pressure systems will continue to fall apart. This weak trough spinning around them, so they'll bring a continued wintry mix on the backside with the cooler temperatures. Along the lower eastern Bering and the chain and the central, you'll have a light rain with the moisture being wrapped around this low pressure system that's starting to fall apart. That's just north of Dutch. In the southeast, you have the high pressure sitting there, but onshore flow, so some light stratus coming in there. You'll have some light rain. Then over the Anchorage and pretty much the whole interior, high pressure dominating, and you'll have mostly sunny skies for Thursday. Step along the Arctic Range with, again, that easterly flow, high pressure dominating there over the Beaufort Sea. So you'll have some blowing snow, light flurries there. Temperatures as of 2 p.m., the warmest was over here on the southeast panhandle. You had 55 at Seward, British Columbia, 54 at Heidelberg, and then 49 at Sitka. As you go farther north, 43 at Yakutat. The northern Gulf, you had 45 at Valdez, 47 at Glen Allen, 52 at Talkeetna. Farther north, you had 54 at Fairbanks, 50 at Fort Greely. And then along the AKpen and southwest territory, Bristol Bay region there, you had pretty much in the mid-40s. Farther north, again, the cooler air, not surprising, you see 11 degrees. That's the coolest temperatures as 2 p.m. there at Barrow. As you go down along the Bering Strait, you're going to have a slightly warmer 25 degrees. Again, it's starting to warm up with this southeasterly push coming from the Gulf towards the northern Bering. And then for the Aleutians, pretty much, again, with this low pressure system, so this warm air coming in here, easterly, southeasterly flow. Not surprised to see the temperatures as of 2 p.m. in the lower 40s. St. Paul at 41, St. Matthew at 40, 37, a little cooler there at Shemya. Tonight's low temperatures, again, are going to be along the Arctic coastline, 5 degrees at Barrow, 5 degrees at Dead Horse, and then pretty much throughout the south or western coastline, pretty much in the lower 30s, 34 at the Pribilofs. The southeast, tonight's low temperatures will be pretty much in the mid-30s to upper 30s there. You do have 40 degrees at Sitka. Tomorrow's high temperatures, not surprising with this strong southerly push, warm air coming in here. You're going to have pretty much all in the upper 40s to mid 50s throughout the southwest interior, extending up to the Alaska Range and into the Fairbanks region. Cooler, again, along with the easterly flow and the high pressure sitting over the Beaufort Sea, 16 degrees at Barrow. And then the northeasterly flow coming down here, you're going to have slightly cooler, 33, 34 degrees there, 33 at Gamble. Southeast, the high temperature tomorrow, again with this strong southerly push and high pressure dominating along the southeast panhandle all the way down to northwestern portion of lower 48, 64 degrees at Klowak, sorry about that. And then tomorrow's worst conditions are going to be over the Bering. And that's going to be marginal VFR to IFR extending from the Bering with these low pressure systems that are falling apart, included systems. That'll extend up through the Bering Strait as well along the Arctic coastline, again with that easterly flow, producing scattered snow showers and blowing snow issues sometimes. You're going to have some low stratus in the Bristol Bay interior and also along the AKpen. The southeast, pretty much high pressure, so clear skies there. But along the eastern Kenai and the Prince William Sound region, you're going to have some marginal to VFR, IFR to marginal VFR conditions there for tomorrow morning. In the afternoon, conditions will start to improve farther north along the Arctic coastline, but the worst conditions again will be marginal VFR to IFR throughout the central to northern Bering, as well as just south of the eastern Aleutians here with the terrain occluded front. Then along the Aleutian and Alaska range, right in this region right here, you'll have marginal to IFR conditions. The southeast, Kenai, and then the Kodiak region, marginal VFR conditions with that trailing the front. Tomorrow's passes at AKwx, MVFR to VFR conditions, Adigan VFR conditions, Lake Clark and Merrill marginal VFR to IFR, rainy marginal VFR to IFR, and then windy VFR conditions, Isabel VFR conditions, Mentasta VFR conditions, Tanita VFR conditions, Portage IFR to marginal VFR, Chillicook and White VFR conditions. And then tomorrow morning's freezing levels, again with the strong southerly push, you're not surprising to see the freezing levels 2,000 feet, reaching all the way up just south of the Brooks Range there. And then they get higher with the high pressure dominating ridge along the southeast panhandle, all the way up to 10,000 feet just south of Hattagwai. The freezing will come down to the surface with cooler air here along the Chukchi Sea, as well as the western Bering. Tomorrow's icing from 7 to 10,000 along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, extending down extending up through to the Pribilofs, as well over the eastern Kenai, and extending over the Alaska range here through the lower Kuskokwim Valley. Tomorrow's jet, strong northwesterly flow, same as been for last month, and then transitions more westerly. And then there's that strong southerly push, the southerly 60 knots jet, and then transitions to westerly. But here that strong southerly push of warm air coming into southwest, into Alaska. Over the southwest territory, you have a southeasterly jet at 50 knots, and then a northeast transition to southeast just over the Kamchatka Peninsula. Tomorrow's 9,000 foot winds. Low pressure system sitting over the western Aleutians and just north of Adak. You're going to have a cyclonic flow, pretty much 10 to 15 knots around these weak low pressure systems. Then you have a low sitting south of Kodiak, southeasterly push throughout the Gulf and southeast panhandle, 20 to 25 knots. Weakens as it goes inland over the northern Gulf, but then it's all southeasterly 30 knots throughout the central interior. Farther north along the Arctic range, easterly 10 knots, and then it transitions to southeast 15. Tomorrow's 3,000 foot winds, again, cyclonic flow around these low pressure systems, weak 10 to 20 knots. And then from the southwest and northern Alaska region, southeasterly winds 15 to 25 knots as they scoot on across over into the eastern Siberian range. The Gulf in the southeast, you're going to have a southeasterly 20 to 30 knots, and then it weakens as you move interior. Tomorrow's turbulence, below 4,000 to 6,000. You're going to have a light to occasional moderate from along the lower Kuskokwim Valley, extending down to the Alaska Peninsula and over to the Pribilofs, and below 4,000 as you go through the northern Bering, extending over to the western portion of the Chukchi Sea. Below 4,000 as you go along the Arctic coastline. We'll be back with your Marines after this.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. The National Weather Service Alaska region has 3 forecast offices strategically located throughout the state that provide weather, hydrologic, and climate forecasts for Alaska and its surrounding waters. One of those offices is located in Fairbanks. Today in the studio I have John Lingus, who is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Fairbanks Forecast Office, and he's going to tell us about his office and what kind of products and services it provides. Welcome to the studio, John.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. Can you give us a quick overview about the Fairbanks Forecast Office?
Sure can. The National Weather Service office in Fairbanks is located on the University of Alaska campus. We're actually renters, and we take up part of a floor in the International Arctic Research Institute, or the AKwx building, on the west ridge of the campus. We are co-located then with the Atmospheric Sciences Department of UAF, which is a great partnership there.
Yeah, and you're 24 hours?
We have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week forecast operations.
Okay, and the general products and services that you provide, what are those?
Well, there's 4 basic types. There are our public forecast products for our 26 weather zones across our northern Alaska, and that covers the land area. Those public forecasts are written in general terms for the overall public. We have marine forecasts that cover 9 marine zones, coastal marine zones that are in use by mariners across northern Alaska waters. And then we also write forecasts for 12 airport locations across northern Alaska. And those 3 types of forecasts are issued all the time, that is every day, 2 to 4 times a day. Then in the summer, actually beginning in as early as May and extending through August and once in a great while into September, we write fire weather forecasts for wildfire concerns, and especially for the land management agencies who are dealing with wildfire. And on top of all those programs, as needed, we write or we issue warnings and advisories for various weather hazards associated with any or all of these programs, these services, as needed and year-round.
What are some of the challenges that you have to endure for your area of responsibility?
Well, I guess one of the most obvious challenges, Jim, is that we have a large area to forecast for. You know, I overlaid this on a map of the lower 48, and it takes up about 10 Midwestern states, the area that we forecast for. We start at the crest of the Alaskan Range, we go all the way north of Barrow, we go from the Canadian border on the east side all the way to the Bering Strait. So it's a lot of real estate.
And a lot of weather happens within that real estate, right? So it's challenging for the forecasters.
You know, sometimes, weather patterns are quiet. We might only get one weather system affecting the area. Other times, when it's very active, we could get 3 or 4 different weather systems affecting our total area. We've got just a lot to look at, a lot to cover, and we have a lot more observations now than we did 20 years ago, but there's still vast areas without weather information. So.
What are some of the unique weather forecasts that you're putting out of your office?
Well, one of the forecasts we began back in the late 90s was a recreational forecast for Mount McKinley. And it's really geared to the upper elevations of the mountain, starting at about 7,000 feet. We have it broken into several layers there in general, and we write some specific forecasts for those layers for the first about 24 hours, like a first 12-hour period and the second 12-hour period. And then we write also a outlook for the next 3 days after that. And we do this at basically to serve not only the public on the mountain, but also we align it specifically with the National Park Service and their ranger program on the mountain that begins in early May and then ends in mid-July. So we try to align it with those types of needs. And one of the things we found out about this forecast is although we can try to provide some detailed information, but mountain weather is highly variable and it changes a lot. But what we found the most useful is the outlook section where their trends are forecast, and that's very critical to planning on the mountain.
Are you doing any experimental forecasts?
Funny you should ask, Jim. Actually, we started over last winter to develop a product called the Offshore Forecast for the Arctic waters. And our coastal waters forecasts go out 60 miles, so if you can imagine where that 60 miles ends north of the Arctic coast, then from that point on, about 100 miles north, we have the Arctic waters, offshore waters forecast, and we divided that area into 3 zones. And it is seasonal. We start at once one of those 3 zones becomes ice-free. It would appear to be normally the western zone. And that begins, like this year, for the first time, was in early July. And Then as the other zones become at least like 50% ice-free, we then add those in. Now this year we only had forecasts for the western zone and the middle zone. The eastern zone never got sufficiently ice-free enough. And then just a couple weeks ago, actually probably within the last week of about November, mid-November, we ended the forecast because the zones had iced up sufficiently then.
Okay. The Storm Ready program, that's a National Weather Service program. You're involved with that. Can you just touch a little bit on the program and how you're using that in your office?
Well, right now we have two communities that are storm ready, Nome and McGrath. And we just look forward to working with other communities. We've touched base with some of them and given information out. And we know that there's several communities desirous of becoming storm ready. So
And what does it mean to be storm ready?
Well, you know, it really means, I term it as an opportunity to discover how you're prepared to handle weather hazards. That's basically in a nutshell. And so it's a lot about discovering what you already have in place, maybe finding a few things that you need to add. You put those in, and then you can become storm ready. It's a voluntary program. It's just a way to become prepared in a certain way for weather hazards.
Great, that's wonderful. John, thank you for coming into the studio today and imparting all this wonderful knowledge to us. We'll have to have you again soon. Don't be a stranger.
All right.
For you folks out there who would like to know more about the Fairbanks Forecast Office, they have a wonderful website. It's weather.gov/Fairbanks. If you type that in on your browser, you'll go to their forecast website, and you'll be able to see a lot of the information that we talked about here in the interview. Thank you again, John, for coming in.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Welcome back to your Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney. Starting off the forecast for the sea ice, the sea ice will continue to move westward. The sea ice forecasters did mention that just south of St. Lawrence or Gamble here, you are seeing some open water. Also along the Norton Sound region, you're going to have some open water. So this ice will continue to melt, and spring breakup is occurring. The Wednesday's forecast for southeast, the inside waters are going to have a northerly flow, and that's going to be pretty much a small craft Lynn Canal that diminishes to northwest there, just south, coming in the Dixon entrance. The outside waters pretty much all northeasterly flow, pretty weak, 10 to 15 knots, and wave heights 6-7 feet. Thursdays, you're going to have a continued northerly flow, strongest over the Lynn Canal, small craft, and then southeasterly as you get into the Dixon entrance, and then outside waters predominantly all southeast, except for easterly there, just south of Yakutat with 15 knots. And then south central for Wednesday with this low pressure system coming in, easterly flow, small craft winds, weakest 10 knots there in the Prince William Sound, northeast 10. And then it's 10 knots, 20 knots throughout the northern and southern Cook Inlet. And then it's small craft from the Barrett Islands down to Shelikof, all easterly flow. For Thursday, pretty much continued northeasterly flow from the Prince William Sound down to eastern Kenai, and then easterly flow 20 knots there down to Kodiak region on the east side of the island. In the inside southern and northern Cook Inlet, you're going to have 15 knots northerly flow, northeast flow 15, then small craft northeast there through the Shelikof Strait region. And then Wednesday, Marines forecast for Alaska Peninsula, all easterly flow, small craft, except for gale force just south of King Cove region, Shungan Islands. And then for Thursday, easterly flow, continued small craft, and then southeasterly there, south of Perryville down to the Cape Sarashoff region. And then Wednesday, Marine forecast for the Aleutians, pretty much with the low pressure sitting over here. You're going to have a westerly flow, and then it diminishes on the Bering side to 10 to 15 knots, and then it's more southeasterly, small craft there near Dutch. On the Pacific side, westerly flow 10 to 15 to 20 knots. And then for Thursday, continued northwest flow as the low pressure system moves into the eastern central bearing here, so we're on the back side of it. And then southwesterly there near AKwx, and then transitions to more westerly and then northwesterly just, as you approach Dutch. Then for the Wednesday marine forecast for the west coast, primarily all easterly small craft winds extending from the northern Bering all the way down to the St. Paul, St. George region. For for Thursday, you're going to have pretty much all northeast flow for the YK Delta and the Bristol Bay region, and then easterly as well as through the St. Matthew region, and St. Paul and St. George easterly 20 knots. Then along Wednesday for the Arctic coastline, easterly small craft winds. That extends all the way down to the Bering Strait. And then Thursday, continuing easterly small craft winds, and then more northeasterly as you enter the Bering Strait region. Tonight's forecast, here's a included low pressure system sitting over just north of Shemya with these weak troughs extending through, rotating around this low pressure system. So I'll bring a wintry mix to the western Bering and northern Bering. Farther north, you have that weak trough that's producing some light snow and blowing snow issues over the Arctic coastline. Then you have the included low just south of the Dutch region with a concluded front extending through the eastern Bering as well as over the just south of Kodiak region. So southeasterly flow, warm air, so light rain there. Southeast, continued high pressure ridge dominating the southeast, even the Anchorage Bowl extending up to the Fairbanks region. You're going to have some onshore flow, some light rain along the southeast and eastern Kenai as well as the Kodiak region. Wednesday forecast, the cooler low will split off. You got this series of weak lows. So continued southeasterly, easterly flow, wintry mix as you go farther west with the cooler air mixing in. The southeast, high pressure dominating. Again, the Anchorage Bowl pretty much dry. And southeast, panhandle, mostly sunny conditions. That's it for your weather. We'll see you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.